Alrighty, first story comes from the Telegraph, and if you missed it, Starling Bank are now reviewing their data policy after customer complains his passport was shared in a web link. So this one gets a little complicated, but basically a customer complained about the passport details being shared with him on a URL, which is, you go to your browser, you type www. That's basically the URL bit. Ben McRae complained that the bank does not take security seriously after they sent him an image of his passport photo page to him using that internet link in an email. He later said he'd reported the bank to the Information Commissioner. Starling said the URL was actually tokenized and that the use of links was extremely rare. Val, what a way to start the year for Starling's media team.
I know. I mean, it's just like so he sort of got in touch on, New Year's Eve. So shock that he didn't get a response back maybe in the next sort of 10 minutes. And then he decides, okay, well, then I'm going to go to LinkedIn, writes this sort of essay of a complaint, which then does get sort of hundreds of likes and comments, one of which actually was from a Monzo software engineer sort of defending Starling, saying, well, it's pretty much impossible to guess a 25-character alphanumeric password or link, rather. So, unless you get hacked, then there's not really much of an issue here. Why are you kind of making a mountain out of a molehill?
Yeah, so I got a one-time link, or certainly I got a link that only I can use, that's only been issued to me, that shows me a picture of my passport. And if Starling's hacked, somebody else might be able to see that. If Starling is not hacked, then that doesn't get seen.
Yeah, I don't want to jump to conclusion. It doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world. I know we're sort of quite protective of fintech on the show, but it doesn't sound like the worst breach of all time. But saying that, the response from Starling, they said, that this, doesn't happen often, et cetera, et cetera. So it sounds like it's an accepted process for them, probably regulatory compliant, or we'll see. But then on the flip side to that, customer expectations, should the customer have to even think about that? I don't know.
I mean, kudos for them for coming out and sort of sticking their hands up and saying, here's what we're going to do about it. And they've had to take it seriously because it's been reported to the Information Commissioner. But Ben, if you're listening, get in touch because dude, seriously? This does. So I remember when I worked across several banks throughout my career, there was always that point where you were trying to get something live and you have that person that go, I've spotted a way that you could hack this. And it's yeah, and it's extremely unlikely that ever happens. And they go, it's extremely unlikely until it does happen. And then you go, well, yeah, but imagine the amount of things that somebody would have to do to get it done. And then let's test this in the wild and see how often it does happen and change it if we need to, roll it out at small scale. The reality is a lot of the fintech banks have been running this at scale for a few years now, and we've not seen this attack vector used. But who knows, maybe on the back of this publicity we will.
Well, even the fact that it's getting national publicity is even something. I mean, it tells you how far the neobanks and fintechs have come because, Starling has what now sort of about 500,000 customers thereabouts. So, in the grand scheme of things, not sort of millions and millions. They're not a bank that's being used by everyone in the UK. So the fact that a national paper is then picking up the story, is actually quite impressive.
But does that speak to a general perception that these new banks may not be secure, or is it a perception that some might find helps their competitive positioning?
I think it speaks to the opposite, actually. It's more that we all expect these new banks to be so secure because they're supposed to be so technologically advanced compared to traditional banks. So when we get faced with something like a URL that if you happen to send the email to the wrong person, somebody else could see it, that's something that then jars you slightly. It's not what you were expecting. And then that's, I think, probably where the initial reaction came from.
Well, I think it's an age where if you look at the year we've just had, especially with Facebook, if you look at, I guess, kind of the stories that have been coming out in terms of data management, data privacy, I think the expectation is from customers that, with all the noise that's sort of circulating at the moment, that banks in theory would be able to look after their data. They don't have to think about it. I don't think this would have got as much attention if those stories hadn't have come out this year.
So in essence, the tech backlash has sort of moved the conversation from digital everything is awesome to digital maybe it's not, and now people are starting to almost look for these stories, which I think is interesting. But then also this is set against the context of TSB's outage last year, Visa's outage last year, old isn't necessarily better either. So there's pros and cons to both sides.
But how far has Starling come that one mishap, not necessarily the worst mishap in the world, but one mishap has caused national press to go?
The old saying is, you've arrived once you've got haters.
That's it. That is it. Absolutely.